In Christian circles, we speak often about becoming one as a couple. But becoming one as a couple requires intimate involvement, not casual participation in each other's lives. Many relationships remain functionally connected, but relationally distant. Two people may share a home, responsibilities, schedules, and even physical proximity, while never truly entering into one another's inner world. Biblical oneness is far deeper than coexistence. It is covenantal involvement. It is the movement from me toward we. From the very beginning, Scripture presents marriage not as casual association, but as profound relational union. In Genesis 2:24, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Marriage, then, is not merely legal joining, it is relational union. The phrase "hold fast" carries the idea of cleaving, clinging, attaching oneself deeply to another person. This is not surface level companionship, it is the intentional intertwining of lives. To become one flesh means your decisions will affect one another. Your joys become shared joys. Your burdens become shared burdens. Your calling becomes interconnected. Your spiritual growth becomes mutual responsibility. Biblical oneness then requires involvement, not occasional awareness, not passive coexistence, not simply living beside each other, but intentionally moving toward one another emotionally, spiritually, relationally, and practically. Casual involvement says, "Tell me if you need something." But intimate involvement says, "I want to understand what this season feels like for you." One maintains distance, the other enters the person world. That is the movement toward we. Amos 3 and 2 speaks of covenant exclusivity. God says to Israel, "You only have I known of all the families of the earth." God is obviously intellectually aware of all nations. So what does he mean by known? This is covenant language. To know in scripture often means chosen relationship, covenant attachment, relational intimacy, exclusive belonging. The point is not just information. Merely tolerated, managed, or fitted into your life somewhere beneath work, hobbies, ambitions, and distractions. Marriage actually says, "Among all others, I choose you uniquely." And that covenant choice requires active and intimate involvement, not merely paying bills or sharing tasks or managing children or functioning as roommates, but learning what it is that strengthens my spouse, what discourages them, where do they feel unseen, what helps them flourish spiritually, where do they feel emotionally disconnected. Because covenant love moves toward understanding. In John chapter 10, Jesus says, "I know my sheep, and my sheep know me." Again, this is not informational knowing, it is relational attachment. The sheep recognize his voice, his presence, his leadership, his care, his nearness. Healthy marriages develop this same kind of relational familiarity. A deeply connected spouse learns the tune behind the words, the fatigue beneath the silence, the fear beneath the frustration, discouragement beneath the withdrawal. But this only happens through intentional involvement, not observation from a distance, but emotional presence. Many marriages struggle because couples remain physically near while relationally uninvolved. They discuss logistics, schedules, finances, tasks, but merely, and often really infrequently discuss fears, spiritual struggles, emotional needs, purpose, calling, loneliness, disappointment, or hope. Oneness cannot develop where involvement is shallow. Matthew 7 and 23 speaks of relational absence. Watch this. Jesus says to a group of people who felt that they really knew him, he said to them, I never knew you. This cannot mean a lack of awareness because Jesus obviously knew who they were intellectually. The issue was relational absence. There was activity without intimacy, association without attachment, performance without relationship. And many couples unintentionally drift into this pattern. They become experts at functioning together while at the same time remaining emotionally unknown. So you can share a bed, raise children, attend church, solve problems, maintain routines, and still remain relationally distant. Why? Because oneness requires more than proximity. It requires intimate involvement. Knowing in Scripture, in our four passages that we've read, knowing is about being joined, being chosen, being relationally connected, covenant attachment, not merely being informed. Biblical intimacy, then, is not simply collecting facts about another person, it is intentionally entering their world. Involvement means entering your spouse's world. Me, on the other hand, stands as a distance and evaluates. We steps in and engages. This is where deeper relational questions matter. For example, what does help look like to you in this season? You may ask your spouse. When do you feel most supported emotionally? When am I trying to help but missing you? What has been weighing on you lately? What has God been teaching you recently? Where do you feel discouraged? How can I strengthen you better? These kinds of questions are not merely information gathering. This is relational alignment forming in real time as you connect with your spouse. This is how emotional trust deepens. This is how spiritual partnership develops. This is how covenant intimacy grows. When you and I intentionally involve ourselves in our spouse's inner world, we are actually living out Scripture. Philippians 2 and 4 says, look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Marriage actually challenges self-centered living. Immaturity may ask, how does this affect me? But love, true love, asks, how is this affecting you? So biblical marriage then requires the death of isolated self-focus. Galatians 6 and 2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But you cannot bear what you do not understand. And you cannot understand what you refuse to engage with. Burden bearing requires intimate involvement, not fixing from a distance, not minimizing, not avoiding difficult conversations, but entering the burden with your spouse. Because sometimes your spouse does not need immediate solutions. They just need understanding, emotional safety, your presence, prayer, partnership. Then a critical question in marriage is not really do we love each other, but also how involved are we in one another's becoming. So how are you involved with your spouse's purpose or calling? Do you encourage their growth? Pray for their assignments? Help create margin for what God has called them to do? Celebrate their progress? Understand what matters deeply to them? Or are you mostly aware from a distance? How are you involved with helping them enjoy life? Do you support their hobbies? Create space for rest? Help them experience joy? Take interest in the things that refresh them? So love is not responsibility only, it is full participation. How are you involved with helping your spouse grow in the Lord? Do you pray together, discuss scripture, ask about spiritual struggles, encourage obedience, sharpen one another spiritually? Because spiritual intimacy does not happen accidentally. It requires intentional relational involvement. So the movement from me to we has to happen because we are involved with one another. But many of us enter marriage still organized around self protection, independence, and personal preference. But covenant marriage continually asks the question, will you move toward a shared life? And that's oneness. Because oneness forms when two people repeatedly choose engagement over avoidance, understanding over assumption, presence over distance, partnership over self focus. Is it not about losing your individuality? It's about learning to live relationally joined together, becoming one flesh. And this kind of involvement reflects the heart of Christ himself. Jesus did not love humanity from a distance. He entered our world. He carried burdens, moved toward us relationally. That is the model for covenant intimacy. That is the look, feel, and experience of oneness. Because becoming one is not built through casual involvement, it is built through intentional, relational, covenant participation in one another's lives. May God bless you